I'm Christine Frizzell in Washington, where there is some major fallout from Tuesday's election results. Sweeping victories by Democrats are leading some Republicans, including the president, to call for drastic changes. It was the first time in a long time Democrats have had a lot to celebrate. Not just winning elections, but winning by a landslide. Abigail Spanberger by 15 points in Virginia and Mikie Sherrill by 13 points in New Jersey, plus the overwhelming passage of a redistricting ballot measure in California. Some Republicans downplaying what the victories might mean.
What happened last night was blue states and blue cities voted blue, and no one should read too much into last night's election results.
President Trump, though, with a slightly different take.
I don't think it was good for Republicans. I think if you read the pollsters, the shutdown was a big factor, negative for the Republicans.
Pollster Scott Rasmussen seems to agree.
When we first polled on this in the earliest days of the shutdown, hardly anybody noticed anything was going on. As of yesterday, 44% of voters nationwide say they have been impacted. Voters hate shutdowns and they blame the party in power.
President Trump is once again calling on Senate Republicans to end the filibuster rule, which requires 60 votes and not just a simple majority to pass legislation.
If you don't terminate the filibuster, you'll be in bad shape. We won't pass any legislation. There'll be no legislation passed for 3.25. We have 3.25 years, so that's a long time.
But those short-term gains could spell long-term pain for Republicans if Democrats retake the chamber and use the new rules to pass their priorities, which some fear could expand abortion rights and take aim at Second Amendment rights, among other agenda items. One reason why many Republicans still oppose the so-called nuclear option.
Everybody knows, follows our government in this process, that in the Senate, it takes a supermajority. It takes 60 votes to do virtually anything.
Exit polling found economic issues were the most important issues for voters. Some Republicans say if they focus more on bringing down costs, they could fare much better in next year's midterm elections. I'm Christine Frizzell reporting.
I'm Matt Gelka in Washington. Very different brands of Democratic politics had big election night victories. The question is now, which way does the party go? The next mayor of New York City, Democratic Socialist Zohran Mamdani, vowed to deliver on left-wing affordability promises like raising taxes on the wealthy to pay for free transportation, rent stabilization, and cheap childcare in the city.
I am a Democratic Socialist. And most damning of all, I refuse to apologize for any of this.
Mamdani's unapologetic socialist views have already made him a target of President Trump. The president has repeatedly threatened to defund New York City if Mamdani won.
The decision facing all Americans could not be more clear. We have a choice between communism and common sense.
Republicans are eager to make Mamdani and socialism the new Democratic brand, and they're already launching ads.
Zohran Mamdani is without a doubt the biggest win for socialism in the history of the country, and it is the biggest loss for the American people.
Your city could be next. Stop socialism, stop Democrats.
In New Jersey and Virginia, two very different Democrats than Mamdani convincingly won governorships. Moderates Mikie Sherrill in New Jersey and Abigail Spanberger in Virginia also ran on cost of living issues while staying closer to the center. The affordability message seems to be the new way for Democrats, but the party might have a problem picking between Democratic Socialist positions or the views of the establishment heading into the 2026 midterms.
No great secret. Of course there's an establishment, and of course there's a division within the Democratic Party.
The issue that he has stressed is being stressed by Democrats across the country, from one end of America to the other, the high costs that the Trump administration is imposing on us.
When New Yorkers were asked in exit polling if they considered themselves Democratic Socialists, 69% said no, including almost 40% who voted for Mamdani. Reporting in Washington, I'm Matt Gelka.
I am Muslim. I am a Democratic Socialist. And most damning of all, I refuse to apologize for any of this.
After wins from far-left Democratic and Socialist candidates, there are growing concerns the Democrat Party has taken a major turn that will cause wide divisions and perhaps even big defeat for the party in the midterms. And joining us to discuss is president of RMG Research, pollster and analyst Scott Rasmussen. Scott, thanks so much for joining us this morning. We appreciate it. First of all, your thoughts overall about what happened last night. What does this mean also for the Democratic Party, do you think, moving forward?
Well, Jan, it's good to see you. And what happened last night, obviously, just it was a good night for the Democrats. No matter how else you want to talk about it, they won all the key races. But they are going to be the races aren't as decisive as you want to think, as some people want them to be. The reality is only about 1 out of 9 New Yorkers voted for Mamdani. The state races in New Jersey and Virginia, those are Democratic states. So it was a good night. The Democrats outperformed expectations a little bit, especially in New Jersey. And we also have to remember that these kinds of races, low turnout off-year races, are dominated by groups who typically vote Democratic, especially people with a postgraduate degree.
Also, we have a historic government shutdown. How much did that play into a voter's decision yesterday?
You know, especially in Virginia, it likely had an impact because so many federal workers are affected by it. But also the impact across the nation is growing. When we first polled on this in the earliest days of the shutdown, hardly anybody noticed anything was going on. As of yesterday, 44% of voters nationwide say they have been impacted by the shutdown, at least to some degree. 16%, so 1 out of 6 voters say they've been impacted a lot. We're starting to see the impact in flight delays and other things, and I think those numbers will keep going up. And yes, voters hate shutdowns, and they blame the party in power.
Let's take a closer look at some of the numbers in New York City. You talked about Mamdani a little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit more than 1 million voters actually turned out for him there, but there's 9 million people in New York City. Here's the numbers. He did win 50.4%, so even if you combine Andrew Cuomo and Curtis Sliwa in this particular case here, he still would have won. However, when you look at the percentages here, you know, you're talking about less than 15% of New Yorkers are actually choosing this person to run the city there. What was your thoughts about this race?
You know, this whole race, reading about it, has just made me roll my eyes all the time. First of all, why did Mamdani win? Well, partly because he ran a good campaign. Partly in the general election because Andrew Cuomo was his primary opponent, a deeply flawed and deeply despised candidate. You would have won against Andrew Cuomo. So there's a...
Well, thank you.
But so, look, there's a divide in the Democratic Party. The divide has been there for a long time. In our polling, we continually poll to understand this divide. You know, on the Republican side, there's the MAGA versus traditional Republicans divide. The MAGA voters clearly are dominant on the Republican side. But in the Democrats, there's the moderate, there's the Chuck Schumer wing, the old school Democrats, and then there's the new rising progressive Democrats. And those two, the party is evenly divided between them. It's a fight that is going to keep playing out for years.
So then what do you do if you're a Democrat?
Well, if you're a Democrat, what you do is you run somebody like Mamdani in New York City, and you run somebody who is far more moderate if you're trying to win a purple district or a purple state race. And that's where the problem comes in, because the progressive base really believes that the reason they're losing is because their candidates aren't progressive enough. You know, I live in Texas. If you try to run a very progressive candidate in Texas, you're not going to do all that well. It's just not going to work.
No, and the question becomes, will this now help Republicans in the midterms because you have such a fractured Democratic Party?
To some degree, but James Carville said it in 1992, and it's still true today. It's the economy, stupid.
Yeah.
The most important factor in determining how the midterms will turn out is going to be the economy next year. Right now, 31% of voters say their finances are getting better, 31% worse. Those aren't great numbers. They're better than they were a year ago. Correct. But what matters is next year.
Yeah, and will Mamdani's, what he wants to propose, will his policies have had that effect early enough before the midterms for folks to realize that it's, you know, not working? So that's also the question too, don't you think?
I think absolutely. The Republicans will do everything within their power to raise up Mamdani and his voice and present him as the face of the Democratic Party, because in large segments of the country it won't work. But, you know, some of what people fear has already happened. There are more banker jobs in Texas than there are in New York these days.
Yeah.
There has been an exodus from the city for a long time. I expect it will continue and maybe accelerate a little bit.
The big headline this morning I'm seeing, Wall Street headed to Texas.
Yeah.
New York will never be the same. All right, RMG Research President, pollster, and analyst Scott Rasmussen, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.